right, so today we have 3 orders of business, and we're just going to let the Tython footage I recorded run in the background while we go over this. 1, we have really good guild news. 2, we're going to make, this episode is obviously going to be Tython in review, which will sort of be the meat of it. I'm going to talk about the monster designs, what it was like starting on the planet, things like that. And then I'll go over a little bit of roleplay and what Covis Cog felt and how his development went over throughout his progression in this sort of starting planet. And without further ado, let's begin. Grimdark. Half off! If you'd like to see my progress as I make new content, enlist today through YouTube memberships or Patreon to become a soldier in the Grimdark Legion. My thanks to the men and women who've already served, whose names are listed here. You keep darkness at an affordable price. So our first wonderful bit of news, of course, is that thanks to wonderful community members, much smarter than me, Commando Chief and Wanderer, the DIA is now an official guild, and I am its guild master, and it is in-game, and you can join it on the Starforge server. So you can join as long as you are a member of the Republic side and you are on the Starforge server. You can hit us up anytime. I do want to start on an Imperial side of that. That'll probably be the best next bit of good news. Even though my personal character is only up to level 12 on the Republic side, I will probably happily start an Imperial side character, partially because I've been begging to create a Darth Maul ripoff, but I actually do want a solid story for him. But generally speaking, it's a very good bit of news there. So we do have an actual physical guild for you to join. The other thing is I've added lore to the DIA and created a roleplay tool in the form of badges modeled after real FBI badges in sort of format. That in-lore gives your character access to the safe houses and secret bank accounts of Dendu. So you can also select what kind of agent you are, which is pretty cool. You can be a spy, a thief, or an assassin on your badge. And you have a blank version of it, which can be found on the Discord server under the pins. So just a PNG you can fill in yourself. It's a blank format, which I sort of just made up in a crappy Photoshop. If you enjoy that, I hope you do. Under the Dendu Intelligence Agency channel, right below the Star Wars channel. And so I can go over a little bit of that. I'll try to pull that up here. And you can see the little bit of work we did here. You have your name, your age, and your type of agent. And I'll sort of go over the type of agent first, but before that, this is what it says right under it being signed by Count Dendu, the mysterious Count Dendu, who exists to pay your bills and get you out of trouble. Such is charged with the maintenance of the sanity, economy, and peacetime of the galaxy. This duty also extends to assassination, information gathering, and confiscation in the name of reclamation. Any laws broken at this time will be supplemented for by House Dendu. And that is sort of the history of House Dendu. And if you notice, this is something I didn't get to talk about previously, but House Dendu's symbol is actually based off of House Serenu. And House Serenu, obviously you have these more flowery, more, say, peacetime symbols and stamps and insignia that are meant to resemble royal families. Well, that's what House Dendu was before all the wealth of House Dendu, theoretically Count Dendu being the last surviving member, puts all of his wealth into the Dendu agency. I also want to make it canon that Dendu, upon his death, has named all the agents of his various different lands as his heirs, but effectively that means that every one of us is only getting a little bit of money because there are so many agents and so many spies everywhere. But that gets into the next point I wanted to make. So the different types of agents are very fun, and I'm actually going to read for you what I wrote up on the Dendu information post, and this will be very fun. So spies are the most common type of agent, solely responsible for tailing targets, befriending them, or reporting on already existing contacts. Now, I don't know if any of you are familiar with the pulp hero, the Shadow, but this is actually very similar to what he did. The Shadow could, as a vigilante, could be thought of as his own mafia boss. That's how he operates and what he does. And the grand majority of his agents are people whose lives that he's saved or people that he's gotten out of a bad situation. So you have been recruited by the ever-mysterious Count Dendu to be given assignments in addition to whatever your normal character's roleplay would normally be. If you're familiar with the Elder Scrolls games, think of this guild like being part of a more morally respectful Thieves Guild or Dark Brotherhood. It's something you do in addition to your normal character's story, both personal and in-game. You'll also have a fun side adventure here. However, Count Drakendu is not stupid. He only recruits agents for jobs he knows they can do. Here are the different types of agents, specialities in the DIA. So I already went over spy. And then you have thief. Thief in charge of stealing back or putting back what has been wrongfully taken and is too dangerous to be left out in the open. And then 3, you have assassin, those who are gifted with the important role of pursuing those who have more or less gone so insane that they truly are agents of pure terrorism. And if you'd like to learn more about that, I really would appreciate you joining the Discord server, where we have an entire channel dedicated to it. All our pinned messages are dedicated to it. And also watch our part 0, because that's a lot of the information that you'll learn on that Discord server, but also just in audio format, so you don't have to go read it if you don't want to. It's also just fun. This is a laid-back roleplay style guild. Like I said before, it is a physical guild now, so you can get in touch with me. I am Kovis Cog or Grimdark Half Off on SWTOR. You can get in touch with anybody else, and they'll help you join. I am technologically illiterate, so I'm looking for as many officers as possible who can help go out and actually invite people, because I don't even know how to do that. This is actually my first time playing with a guild and with a paid account. So this is my first time really wanting to be part of a group dynamic and community, other than me also wanting to do the solo story. But let's move on to roleplay. Our character, Kovis Cog, if you want a brief rundown of him and you didn't watch part 0 of this series, our character, Kovis Cog, is a responsibility-driven, internally tormented by responsibility, light-side Jedi consular who uses the Jedi Sentinel combat style. He is a brutally bruised and beaten up fellow who spent a long time working on his physique. The reason he is so powerfully built and muscular is that 6 years ago he watched the death of his master, who was also an agent of Drakendu, and he basically was, he was nearly crippled at this time. He has bruising around his tentacles that's permanent. It's just going to be stuck there as a mark forever. He lost one of his eyes. He has a scar down them, and he lost 20% of the vision in his other eye, which is why he has that mottled yellow color, which I really liked because it was in comparison to the normal bright yellow. And I have like a whole color psychology breakdown of that in part 0. But that is effectively where he is. He's part of our light side consular run. And I'm going to be going over what his roleplay and suffering was like throughout Tython. And then after that, we'll go into Tython as a territory and just as a general review of Tython in general. So as a pretty color enjoyer, the first thing I wanted to comment on was actually the lightsaber, and I might have just said it, but I was actually really surprised because in the cutscenes, we still get the green lightsaber from the Jedi Consular story, but in the actual gameplay, we built a blue lightsaber complementing the combat style of the Jedi Guardian, which is the combat style that we're using, which I found very cool and very interesting. I don't mind that at all. I find very fun. How Kovis Cog feels, he definitely feels emboldened and accomplished. That's on here a lot. So I'm basically putting together the event that he went through and then the emotion associated with it and how that's changed him at all, if at all. But finally making his first lightsaber after what I decided was canonically 4 months on the planet. I feel like Tython is much shorter than most planets. I wanted to canonically make it so for my character story that it's about 6 months to a year, depending on each planet, but Tython was very short, and so I wanted to make it so it's just 4 months, and we'll say that he's about 2 months away from becoming 27. He's a Nautolan, so again, their aging is almost exactly in line with humans. So finally making his first lightsaber after 4 months on the planet, definitely feels accomplished about that. I really enjoyed the Naylan Twillick storyline. Me and my friends had fun talking about this, and we talked about him as the only anti-twink Twillick. That's basically what we talked about. It's kind of hard to take Twillick seriously in the Star Wars universe, especially with a lot of pervy female authors turning them into the canonical BDSM race. They get a succulent or dramatic euphoric feel when you pull on their leku, their flesh tendrils coming out of their heads, etc., etc. But Naylan really stepped up to the plate here. I really enjoyed the idea of him finding Jedi holocrons of Dark Jedi, becoming this kind of self-taught Sith. We see the progression of his character. I thought he was very well realized. I think Naylan is very redemptive. Obviously, I had the benefit of getting through this story with friends, and we had the ability to make commentary on it, and sometimes during the more boring aspects, we could talk over it, but I never wanted to miss a Naylan cutscene. Naylan was very, very good. So Naylan was the dueling champion of the local Kukori Twillick village near Tython. Absolutely loved his storyline. I absolutely loved everything about him. Just the fact that he was driven by the same kind, and there was a lot of commonality with my character. And I'm also very grateful to have made a roleplay character, by the way, to have actually thought of a backstory, because the reality is, without a backstory, I would just be going through the motions. But now I was free to have this very real similarity between me and Nayland, and both being these characters, both my character of Kovis and this character of Nayland, being driven by an internal sense of duty. As the dueling champion and thus warrior champion of his village, he feels that same sense of ingrained responsibility, but in his case, it drove him to neurotic madness and the temptation of power through the dark side, because he doesn't have formal Jedi training. Which brings me to my favorite part, but also a part that I'm very sad was underplayed. So I was finally happy, because obviously this time through my Jedi Consular run, I was actually paying attention to the story beats, and I actually got to realize that one of the choices near the end of the Nayland story, after you beat him in combat, after you get your first lightsaber, after this whole coming of age thing, you actually get to say, hey, guys, train Nayland as a Jedi. Don't let him waste his Force-sensitive potential on this kind of self-destructive path. He's clearly a hero to the local Kokori village. He clearly would make a great ambassador to the local Kokori village. This is another theme that's played out here, though it's not really touched on as much as I'd like. I think this had a lot more story potential, and I definitely would have liked to see more of it spread out. But this is the idea that the Kokori village is not legally sanctioned by the Republic, who at this time the Jedi are very closely connected to. They're not legally sanctioned to be there, even though they're the natives, and they're not allowed to be basically protected by the Jedi. But having Nayland, and that's also a light side decision. It should be a light side decision, because what it does is it creates this ambassadorial role through Nayland, through the Kokori village, and it basically increases peacetime and decreases conflict between the village and the Jedi, while also creating a very real, powerful protector in Nayland, who really, because of his unique situation, obviously he's much older than most people going through it, because he's already an accomplished dueling champion. Just having him there is a huge deal. He almost serves the same purpose as the Jedi Service Corps, if you're familiar with that, but in a much bigger way, in a much bigger role. So very happy with the Nayland storyline. I fully recommend the Nayland storyline. Definitely like that. All right, so stopping Flesh Raiders and rescuing Padawans. This is a side quest I chose to do. There was a side quest that I'm sad I didn't run into. I remember it from like 2011. This is a bit of a side tangent. I remember the side quest from like 2011. And this is all the way back when SWTOR first launched. And it's really funny because it's just two Jedi Padawans who want to go get busy behind some bushes, basically. They want to follow their passionate relationships. Now, from a serious perspective, it's obviously, look, you're training as a Jedi. If you want to form attachments, the Jedi Order has always been historically very clear on this. You are free to leave the Order, get married, and settle down. That's fine. But do that after your Jedi training, if you still feel like that after your Jedi training. And so it is a light side decision to stop them from boning, and basically hold up a picture of the Force and be like, isn't there someone you forgot to ask? So I just thought, for comedic effect, I did try to find that again. Sadly, I couldn't find that side story again, but I always loved doing it whenever I would play this game. I mentioned before, but this is my first time playing with a paid account. It's my first time playing with anything, even though I've played this game and gone back through Tython, under the Jedi Consular, and under the Jedi Knight so many different times, and just explored around like an idiot. But getting back to stopping the Flesh Raiders, I love the Flesh Raider design, and I like the Flesh Raider environmental storytelling. I like the idea that they are basically Monkey who comes in contact with Mushroom and then decides to attain power, because that is effectively their enhancement with the Force. You see them start to develop all the different enemies you face from the Flesh Raiders are actually good environmental storytelling, because these are not things or positions that existed like, I don't know, a few years ago. The innovations in Flesh Raider culture, and also it's Star Wars, so you can have a name like Flesh Raider and have it not be corny. But the innovation, these sort of squat Neanderthal hammerhead slug people, actually developing a religion, actually developing meditation, positions like shaman, beastmaster, things of this nature. This is all due to their interaction with the Force, and seeing them evolve and grow, even as that's being polluted and controlled, was very interesting to me. So I found that very distracting and fun. I found the environmental storytelling of the Flesh Raiders to be very fun, and then also the side story and side mission of rescuing kidnapped Padawans. I found that to be very fun as well, just because you do have that same moment where you get to influence your fellow Padawans. and you get to basically influence them to the light or the dark. And of course, we chose the light side. We chose to get people paramedics and get people help, and focus on healing the Padawans rather than going on a suicide mission against the Flesh Raiders. That was a-okay with me. And Kovis Cog again. So emotions so far we have accomplished, and back with the Nayland storyline. He's proud of Nayland's potential not being wasted. And then we have here again emboldened and accomplished from the Flesh Raider storyline. I've said before, and I'll say it again, that I'm very, very happy that I role-played out and wrote out Kovis Cog's backstory before getting into this. And a great example of that is the character that we have to talk about next, and that's Yuan Par, who through her, we do get introduced to Quen. Quen is much cooler than Yuan Par, and we'll get to him next, but Yuan Par has a lot of cool elements. It's just much like the end of the Nayland storyline. Like, the reason I didn't remember, despite me playing the consular so many times, way back when, the reason I did not remember there was a choice to make Nayland a Jedi is that we never see Nayland as a Jedi. We never see Nayland. We never go to Nayland and say, "Hey, buddy, don't worry. Not only are we gonna get you help, but actually, here's Nayland in his Jedi robes, and here's him training, and here's him with a comical blue lightsaber because he's also blue." And here's the fun thing: we never see that. We literally just get to suggest it, and it's a light side option. In that same way, there's a telling not showing of Yuan Par being effectively gender-bent Indiana Jones, and also being a struggling hero against a horrible disease that's slowly corrupting her body. And sadly, you get none of that communicated to you. She effectively functions as a boring talking head, and all of her interesting lore is kept hidden behind how she is presented. So I would definitely like to see a rewrite of Yuan Par, with her struggling more. Maybe she's unable to talk. Maybe she's unable to do these things. Because here's the thing. Her hiding it from the council is fine. That makes sense from a narrative perspective, and that's perfectly fine. But that narrative cannot take precedent over a story. Especially when we get to fully Tython in review, which we're about to. And that really comes down to one of the harder things to admit about Tython, which is that, frankly, it is boring when compared to the other starting planets of these various characters, because I had friends who were playing basically all non-Force sensitives, and almost all of them were more interesting when they started off. But yeah, Yuan Par, a very real wasted opportunity. But as far as Kovis Cog himself, those of you who watched our Part 0 know that Kovis Cog has an incredible internalized guilt complex, to the point where he won't even say his master's name after he let him down, or feels like he let him down when he was a Padawan. So he feels heavily guilty about Master Yuan Par, as though kind of an irrational survivor's guilt about Master Yuan Par, as though somehow he was supposed to save her, even though she chose to sort of hide the fact that she was sick. And Quen was also sworn to secrecy to not tell. So this is an irrational response from Kovis Cog, but it is his response nonetheless, that he feels heavily guilty about Master Yuan Par. And I do like, again, the fact that we wrote out Kovis Cog means that we now have a reason to remember Yuan Par when otherwise we would forget all about her. And I think really Yuan Par is a very weak part of the Jedi Consular storyline, and I think it's a part that, because it's so boring and forgettable, she is so boring and forgettable in her presentation, not in her actual character, but in her presentation, but also such a key part of the story. I think this is why people give up on the Jedi Consular storyline. I think it's why it's considered the most boring of the storylines you can play in this game. And I think it's why most people, and also the most boring of the Force-sensitive storylines, obviously, by proxy. If Master Yuan Par is sort of the anchor that's weighing down the boat of this story, then Quen definitely is the wind beneath its sails, picking up speed. Quen is a simple Transdoshan traditionalist. He believes in the religion of the Scorekeeper, and he wants to go on a hunt. He believes in a hardcore honor culture, and with my light side consular... firstly, I just want to say they're both monster designs, my Nautilin and this Transdoshan. It felt like, if those of you who are familiar with my Conan content, it felt like Cthulhu and Bakrug just kind of hanging out. Or those of you who aren't familiar with it, Cthulhu and Godzilla just kind of hanging out and thinking about ways to fight and take out enemies. But I really liked the dichotomy between my more light side character and also this guy who wanted to live by a hardcore honor culture of slaughtering their enemies. And it's just beautiful how that interplays. I really like him as a companion, as a healer. I definitely appreciated him. I went to higher level areas I wasn't ready for before and got my butt whooped, but with him as a companion and healing me, I was able to get through them. Quen definitely left an impression, and every time he talks, the cool alien noises that make you want to read the subtitles. I think that Quen is very well done. There's not much to say about him, other than I really enjoy him. I really enjoyed Quaison's design. I really enjoyed the Nautilin design that I had next to him. I enjoy how the two play off each other. And it was just very fun being a monster and another monster, going throughout the galaxy dispensing our own types of justice. So Quen, definitely an A-plus character. Master Yuan Par, D-plus because of presentation. Again, good lore, but D-plus because of presentation. Like I said before, I think Yuan Par is why a lot of people forget about this storyline. Key character, but forgotten about. Alright, and before moving on to any other monster designs that I really liked, and I do have 3 of them that come to mind, the only thing left to talk about really is the geography of Tython itself. Like I said before, it does have to be said that when compared to a lot of the grimy, dirtier, character-filled starter planets, including Korriban, so whether you're a Sith, a bounty hunter, an Imperial agent, whether you're a smuggler or a Republic commando, all of these places that you start in have infinitely more character and fun stories than Tython. Tython is slow, and frankly speaking, you are a slightly more action-packed version of a Jedi. And even then, of the Jedi, obviously I chose the slowest story. So with the Jedi Knight, you at least get the classical hero's journey, but the Jedi Consular is basically you going through what are effectively the very boring processes of becoming a space nerd wizard. I'm absolutely fine with that. I like being a space nerd wizard. With that being said, again, compared to these character-filled worlds, we get kind of a generic, oh, look at the grass and the trees and the plains world of Tython. I felt like more could be done with this. That's not really bad, but it was definitely like a C+, or, a 6.5 to a 7 out of 10 sort of planet. It was still rich with lore. There were still things to discover. I appreciated that greatly, but altogether a forgettable planet, despite the fact that the flora and the flora was meh, but the fauna, the beasts, the animals, that's what we'll get to next. Those were actually quite memorable. Let's go into that. All right, so there were a lot of great monster designs, but I selected 3 that I really wanted to talk about. The first was the biggest missed opportunity in my book, and that was the Guid. So you got blue skin, blonde to white hair, and an exaggerated head that resembles something like a cross between a primitive prehistoric sloth and a baboon. Given that this is Tython, no less, I really, especially with the exaggerated head, this communicated to me a much more intelligent creature than it was, and a much stronger creature than it was, but it was just kind of a level 6 enemy. It was something that you could very easily take out alone. It felt almost defenseless, which really is sad due to its powerful build, its structure. Like I said, it looks like a ground sloth crossed with a primitive, again, unseen prehistoric creature and a baboon. This kind of combination, again with the exaggerated head, really makes me think of a force-sensitive creature. It's on Tython, and I was expecting some type of telekinetic blast or some type of debuff being applied to the player, but sadly the Guid is just not used all that well, and I think that's very sad. I think this sort of creature design should have belonged to something a little stronger, especially since you can see it in comparison to an NPC in this little screenshot here, where it's about twice the size of an average player character, which is pretty cool. So again, just something I thought that was kind of a missed opportunity. Next up are the Huntath. Huntath, I think were pretty cool. Bone hellhound looking things, nearly hairless but still a thin coating of hair, alien bone dog, cat, mole creatures. They had enough about them that were unique, associated with their design. They had patriarchs and matriarchs, and each one were capable of knockdown effects. They were capable of doing almost, when you were a lower level character, like below level 10, and you didn't have a companion yet. Huntath were a real threat. You would try to avoid them. Very, very cool. They would graze next to... They were some of the only animals that could graze next to the battle droid area that were protecting the first blade. Definitely enjoyed them. Not much to say about them. Thought that creature design was just very cool. I liked the idea of the bone elements covering up their eyes so they appear as kind of these blind things that can detect you through sound. Very enjoyable there. And the king of monster designs for Tython was an accidental side boss I ran into during a side mission on an Ilum crystal or Kyber crystal cave, which was a dark beast, which looked like the 1980s movie Gremlins after they had turned from Mogwai, mixed with a Rancor. And I really liked the design of the beast. I really liked his pyrokinesis. I really like the idea that this creature kind of breathed home an idea of being aged. You can see that it used to have much more horn-like protrusions, but everything has kind of been broken off. Everything from its tusks to its back spines. That it has been living in this cave forever and it has been thriving by the skin of its teeth, and it has become stronger and stronger over time. Its pyrokinesis obviously helping with that. But also it's an example of a force-sensitive creature or a psychic creature on Tython, which I don't feel like we got enough of while we were here. And that is my roundup of Tython in review. Altogether, I give Tython, sort of said this before, but about a 6.5 to a 7 as a planet. Again, if you want to join our guild, we have new information on that. I put that out at the beginning of the video. And that's about that. That's what we have so far. That's my catch-up for the first planet I enjoyed on Tython. I can now delete the footage and make room for more footage that we can use to talk about SWTOR. And of course, thank you all for watching, and have a lovely night. If you're part of my usual audience and you're wondering why I'm doing any of this, it's simply because I have the time to give back to my community and do something fun with them while I'm currently going through this health crisis. Thank you again for watching, and again, have a lovely night.